Hey, Don, thanks so much for joining me today.
My privilege, honored to do it.
We are talking to Don Piper, the author of 90 Minutes in Heaven and a series of other books, of course. He's the head of a powerful ministry and travels often. Don's story is featured in the new Angel Studios film, After Death, which opens in theaters, I believe, October the 27th, if I've got that date right.
Yes,
Um,
October 27th.
Don, of course, After Death, the movie deals with near-death experiences, including your testimony and many others. Don, for those who don't know your story, just briefly tell us um, your testimony following that tragic car crash. I believe it was back in 1989. What
Correct.
ha- what happened? What happened?
I was a pastor on his way to church to lead a
Yeah.
Wednesday night Bible study. I had attended a pastor's conference for 3 days, and I'm just on the road on a rainy, cold day, headed back to church about 150 miles, right outside the camp grounds where we had the conference. Less than 10 minutes, I was crossing a rural, narrow bridge, and the tractor trailer truck crossed the center line and hit me head on. Horrific collision. Two other vehicles besides the truck and myself were involved. So it was just a horrific accident. And miraculously, everyone else was okay. I was not. I was killed instantly and treated by four paramedics and the state trooper who worked the accident. And in spite of their best efforts to resuscitate me, they were unsuccessful. I was pronounced by those paramedics dead on the scene, body covered up with a waterproof tarp. And they were waiting for a medical examiner to come in and do an investigation so they could take me away. The moment the truck struck me, I was standing at the gates of heaven, at least one of them. There are 12, according to the Revelation, and I was at one, and surrounded by people I had known and loved in life who had preceded me in death. And we were having a spectacular reunion. They looked great. If you want to look great, heaven is where you want to be. And they looked great. Back on the bridge, I looked terrible. I had been dismembered, really torn apart. So the contrast between what I looked like and they looked like at the gates of heaven and what I looked like and what they looked like when they died, what couldn't have been more stark. But there we were at Heaven's Gate, and I didn't have any consideration whatsoever of what was happening back on the bridge, and many things were happening on the bridge. So it was
Mm.
quite a moment in my life and my death and my life.
How long, in our world, how long was that period?
That's a good way to say it. An hour and a half. 11:45 a.m. was the time of the accident on the bridge. At 1:30 in the afternoon, a gentleman who had come upon the accident, another attendee at the conference, uh, whom I had not met, I did not know him, but he felt God speak to him and say, "Pray for the man in the red car." That would have been me, the
Mm.
fatality. He got permission to get in the car. He did. He held onto my right shoulder, the only thing I did not break, under the tarp in the dark, and prayed virtually an hour and a half. It was 11:45. At 1:30, he's singing the great old hymn, "What a Friend We Have in Jesus," and I start singing it with him. And I was back in the dark, unaware of what had happened to me, didn't know anything about the accident, certainly didn't know who he was, and had no idea why we were singing in the dark. And that's what was happening. And that began the rest of my life here.
We're talking about After Death, the film by Angel Studios, and I should tell people that it includes interviews with some of these people in your life at that time. It's not just an interview with you; it's an interview with other people around you, and
Right.
like I said, interviews with other people who have had a near-death
Yes.
experiences. One thing you say in the movie, Don, is that it's hard to describe in human words what
Yes,
you saw.
it is.
Um, and I'm not even sure what my question is, but can you kind of explain in human words what it's like not to be able to describe
Well,
in human words something that
exactly.
you
And the
saw?
reason it is difficult is because we're using earthly words, human words, to
Yeah,
describe a heavenly place.
yeah,
And virtually anyone, including the Apostle Paul, had a great deal of difficulty talking about this because it is beyond any words that we have. The music is beyond any music we've ever heard. Not just the quality of the music, but the quantity. For instance, I heard thousands of songs at the same time in heaven, but they were symbiotic. They didn't clash with each other. Quite the contrary, they complemented each other, and you could distinguish each one of them with your heavenly ears. Now, how would one describe that except that way? Certainly, there are colors there that we have never seen here, because they're in between the spectrum of our human eyes here on Earth. Um, yes, there's a gate made of pearl, but it's so dazzling because of the light reflecting off of it that it looks living. And I'm not sure that it is living in our sense, but it certainly looks that way. The people that I saw were so perfect in every way and timeless, in a sense that they were not old and they were not particularly young, but fully recognizable as themselves. I knew them. They knew me. In fact, they were expecting me uh, as we spent time together. And that's a word I'd use advisedly. There is no time in heaven; it's timeless. And we interacted with each other. I realized that they were not the way I left them, or when they left me. They were perfect in every way. No scars, no blemishes, no. Well, it's just perfect. I believe the only one in heaven with scars is Jesus to remind us of how we got there. But they were magnificent, truly. People who were slumped over with Parkinson's or something were standing upright. People who had no teeth here on earth smiled at me with dazzling smiles that I saw for the first time, really. So over their heads, I could see through this massive wall. I could see a boulevard made of gold, which shouldn't surprise us. We are told that there is one. There are trees inside, the tree of life. We can eat of it there because there is no evil, just only good. And we don't eat for sustenance in heaven. We eat for fellowship because God wants us together. It's just the most real thing that's ever happened to me. And I admit freely, it's very difficult to describe in
Mm.
earthly words. There were angels above me. I don't even know how many, and they were different sizes and shapes and different numbers of wings. It was there were angels without wings. It was just a buffet for the senses, and it's something I think of just on a moment to moment basis here on Earth. This doesn't seem real to me now. That is my reality.
Mm. Mm. One thing I've noticed, Don, is that the evangelical community used to be very skeptical of testimonies like this, and I don't know where we are now, but it seems like stories like these are at least accepted more now. Um, have you noticed that? And if so, what has happened? Well, I should probably say here, Lee Strobel used to be skeptical of these, and now
Yes,
he's written a book about them. So
sure.
I'm just curious, have you seen that? I hate to use the word evolution, but yeah, have you seen that change?
There's been revolution is probably or evolution is probably not a bad description. Um, I would have counted myself among them, frankly, until
Mm.
I got run over by a truck and killed, and then I then it became my reality. I knew it was real, and of course I came back here. You might know I came back here to 13 months in a hospital bed and 34 operations and 3 years of rehabilitation to learn to walk again. So that couldn't have been more real than it was. Certainly more pain than I ever knew was humanly possible. So I know reality. I've felt it all too well. I think it's because a lot of the research that's been done, many of these scientists, many of these medical doctors who have studied this at length, like practically their entire lives, have concluded that there is life after death. And they've written very scientific treatises about it. Some of those people are in this movie. They are interviewed in this movie. They present their lifelong research, and having gone into it very skeptical, probably more skeptical than some religious people, have come out on the other side believing there is life after death. And so I think it's been a process. Uh, People are concerned about anything extra biblical. I am too. I wouldn't have described this if it hadn't been biblical, in my estimation. I saw things I expected to see, frankly. I did some things, I didn't see many things that were far beyond anything I had ever really considered in terms of their beauty and majesty and glory and those kinds of things. So I'm not surprised by that. But I didn't really plan to die that day on the bridge. I was on my way to church to lead a Bible study. But I did. It tells me that you have to be prepared at all times. Heaven is a prepared place for prepared people. And you're not going just because you're good or your grandma was a Presbyterian or a Methodist. It is a personal decision you have to make yourself. I had made it at 16. I just wasn't planning on dying on a bridge 22 years later. Thank God I was ready. And that's where I went. I do think people are obviously curious about this. They want to know if there is a life after death, and they want to know what the options are. Well, there are two, in my estimation. We've been told that there were two. And some of my colleagues who are in this movie went to the other place. They went to hell. And their descriptions are easily as vivid and horrifying as those of us who had a heaven experience are majestic and awesome. And so those are the options. And I have talked to people for years who had both of them. It's now at the point, I think, where people really want to know, and maybe it's because the state of the world today, where so many painful, difficult, dangerous options are available every day. Terrible things are happening every day, not just on the other side of the world, but all around us. And people have a tendency to think more about the afterlife. Is there one? And where is it? When they're faced with that, they watch the 6 or 7 o'clock news every night. They wonder what if something were to happen to them or somebody they care about. And we all know the death rate here is 100%. We're not getting out of this alive.
Let's turn to the movie briefly. Of course, we're talking about After Death of the Angel Studios movie. Why did you want to be a part of this movie? And, what do you want moviegoers to be thinking about as they're walking to their cars?
Good question. I didn't think I was going to be a part of this movie. When I got the first phone call, probably 3-4 years ago, from Canada, I thought, well, I really don't have time for this. I'm not sure these people are on the level, because I get phone calls a lot of times from folks that are just curious. They're just asking questions, which is fine, but I can only do so many. So I kind of put them off, and they were pretty persistent. And so I finally, talked to them, and I really realized what they were trying to do. The director of the movie, Stephen Gray, he suffered a tremendous loss, a personal loss in his own life. And of course, he was very curious about this, a faithful believer for a long time, but this just took the wind out of his sails. So he wanted to pursue this and try to line up as many people as he could to talk about it. And I was one of those people. About that time, COVID came. And so, people weren't able to go anywhere, be in each other's presence. But he flew an entire film crew here to Texas, about 15 or 20 miles from the accident site, rented a house. And we all went up there and did interviews for this movie. Well, who knows when COVID might turn the corner and be over. So this just kind of went on and on. I began to wonder if it was a project that was ever going to come to be. And then we began to see the light at the end of the tunnel, and they began to line up more of the interviews, both the scientific interviewers and interviewees and the rest of us. And it just came together. And then Angel Studios, the people who distribute The Chosen and Sounds of Freedom, a very successful, far successful beyond than anything could have imagined, decided to distribute the film and buy into the film, and they did. And I just came from there, and it's magnificent. And this is scheduled to open on the 27th of October in over 2,200 theaters. That's unprecedented. I mean, that's unbelievable, really. I did a movie in 2015 based on my first book, 90 Minutes in Heaven. And I think we opened at 11 or 1,200 theaters, and they thought that was pretty good. This is twice that many theaters. So there's a great deal of excitement and anticipation behind this. Everybody wants to know if somebody that they knew and loved is really having a great afterlife, and if they are waiting for us. And I certainly found that to be the case. They knew I was coming. I don't think anybody sneaks up on heaven. Everybody up there knows who's coming. So if you're coming, they're waiting. But they're not like just congregating around the gate. There's no time for them. So they're waiting for you in our present. And it may be decades before you join them, but not for them. They're excited about your arrival. And I can't wait to go back to see them. I obviously have had a meaningful life for the past 34 or 35 years being here. But honestly, I would rather be there. Spending time with these people that are in the movie, they'd rather be there too.
And what do you want people to be thinking about after this movie is over?
We want them to, first of all, invite people who may be skeptics, people who may be curious, but not believing at all there's something after this. And if there is, not being particularly sure what it is. And there's a way to do that through Angel Studios in the pay it forward process that they do. You can get free tickets because other people have paid for them. That's how interested we are in having people go to heaven. So bring somebody with you, because what we want you to do is to walk out to the car answering those people's questions and having an opportunity to help them make reservations in heaven. And that's what my life has been about in the past 35 years. Is I'm trying to get people into heaven and help them have a better trip on the way. And this movie is the Get People Into Heaven movie. It is having people curiosity aroused and questions answered, and providing opportunities for those of us who know the process of coming to Christ, introduce those people, because we love them here and we want to love them there. And so that's what this movie is about. It is, at the very least, a conversation starter, but at the very most, it's somebody's first step into the glory of God.
Amen to that. We've been speaking to Don Piper, the author of 90 Minutes in Heaven, and he's featured in the movie, the new Angel Studios movie, After Death, which opens October the 27th. Hey, Don, thank you so much.
My privilege, honor, and thank you for what you do.